English translation 326th contact. Monday, 15th April 2002, 14:03 hours.
Be greeted, Eduard, my friend.
Oh, hello, Ptaah. I thought you would come today, only I was not expecting you until later tonight.
I will be otherwise engaged, which is why I am visiting you at this time. Enclosed, I have some work that you should do for us.
Quetzal mentioned it. Of course, I will do everything as soon as possible. But tell me, why are you flying around with your ship so open and unshielded lately? Because once again you were observed when you visited me on 14th March at 6:12 HRs. Here, I wrote this sighting report yesterday for the August Bulletin. After I received 2 telephone calls late last Friday evening from people who were able to observe you when you flew here, and your ship must have shone like a big tree of lights. Read this, please.
Sighting report.
Telephone call, 13th April 2002, 21, 46 hours and 22. 13 HRs, in the presence of Madeleine, Hans Georg, and Freddie. Mr. Meyer, I know you on the one hand from seeing you, and on the other hand through television reports, newspaper reports, and journal reports. About 3 months ago, there was also a report about you in a Thurgau daily newspaper. But the reason why I am only calling you today is that we had to think for a long time whether we should say anything at all about what I am about to tell you. Furthermore, and this is actually the main reason why I am only telephoning you today, I and my 2 companions first had to process our experience to such an extent that we can understand what we actually saw with our own eyes. I would like to tell you, Mr. Meyer, honestly that we never believed in UFOs and thought you were a nutcase. And we honestly thought other things about you. We are very sorry about that today, because through our experience we have gained a different picture of you. So we think today that the things you say are true and that the stories about you are told, written, and broadcast on television. But now I would like to come to why I am calling you so late in the day. It was 14th March, 3 weeks ago. When I came here early in the morning, from Dusnang TG via Sitzberg and Schmidruti at about 0610 HRs, together with a colleague from work and my brother, I drove to work in my car in the Zurich Oberland. We saw a large, disc-shaped UFO with a fairly strong yellowish-white glow, flying from the south over the Schmidruti Army Complex towards the north, at an altitude of only about 200 or 300 meters. In order to be able to observe the UFO better, which we estimated to be at least 5 meters in size, we stopped at the left-hand bend on the hill above Schmidruti, from where you can look down on a large lumber yard and a biotope, got out of the vehicle and observed that no sounds of animals could be heard, and also no sound of the object, which suddenly lost height quickly and seemed to fall down to the Hinterschmidruti farmhouse, shining brightly, and then just suddenly disappearing, without being able to see or hear anything. At first we actually thought that the UFO had crashed, so we climbed over the gate on the hill of the Hinterschmidruti farm and walked forward to check. But apparently everything was all right, because the homestead was in its place unharmed, and there was no sign of the UFO. Do you, Mr. Meyer, have an explanation for this? Because first of all, you deal with such things, and secondly, it was the house of the Phi Gu Association, where you live, over which the UFO crashed and suddenly disappeared. Unfortunately, we cannot talk about our experience with anyone in our circle of friends and acquaintances, because with everyone we know, we would only make ourselves ridiculous, as we know from earlier statements when such things were discussed. But since we still cannot really cope with and understand what we have experienced despite all our efforts, not even our wives, to whom we have of course told everything, we would like to talk to you about it. However, we do not dare to come to you in Hinterschmidruti, which is why we would like to talk to you about everything at our home, or somewhere in a restaurant, if we could meet at a certain place. We would be very grateful for that. SU, HS, Orsam, Switzerland.
Well, what do you say?
What shall I say to that? The whole thing is true. Everything actually happened, so
That is all there is to it. I mean, why did you do it? The people got quite a scare and still are not over it, as I was told on the phone. First there was the story with the man from Perg, and now this.
I have already observed the three men on various occasions. For years they have been driving their vehicles regularly at the same time on the road above the center, except Saturday and Sunday, as I have noticed. So I was interested to know what kind of people they are, so I took the liberty of listening to their conversations in their vehicle. I noticed that they were also talking about you and the center, and that your explanations about the contacts with us were probably just silly inventions and fantasies, etc., just as your photographic material regarding our flying apparatuses could probably be nothing more than fakes. Somehow this annoyed me, so I decided to find a way to prove the three men wrong. So I came up with the glorious idea of how you used to say that the next time I come to you in the early hours of the morning, I will fly by visibly and slowly for the three of them. I actually did so on the 14th of March at 6:10 HRs, in which I enjoyed the amazed and disbelieved faces of the three men when I gave them my short demonstration. But the three were not the only ones who were able to observe my flying apparatus, for there were two other people in Schmidruti at this early time, each one separately, however, who will with complete certainty keep silent about what they saw. For I have found with both of them that they are afraid of making themselves ridiculous, because they have been calling you a swindler and a nutcase since you came to live here, and now they do not want to revise their opinion of you in public. You would call that cowardice.
I do too, because if a person cannot stand by the recognized truth for whatever reason, then I find it cowardly and mendacious. But let us not go there. It was recently forgotten to talk about what your learned ones said about what I asked you. By this, I mean whether a hyphen or a forward slash really needs to be used when a word or term is written in two sexes, as in the case of spouse and wife. Should it really be called spouse and then hyphen followed by in? Look here, I am writing this, or should it be written with a slash and therefore spouse? What do the people who know how to write in German say about this? And what about the two-gender spelling if a capital I is used in the word? For example, if I write the word Leser und Leserinnen instead of abbreviated with a slash Leserinnen.
I could actually clarify that. The version with a capital I in the middle of the word is as wrong as a hyphen. The spelling, if we want to take your examples, our writers of the German language explain, must be as I write here E-partner, in that is to say, Leserinnen. Other spellings, so I was told, correspond to bad falsifications of the German written language. Therefore, you should be careful that no such falsifications appear in your writings. Christian, in particular, however, tends to counteract this, so that he should be informed and made aware of the fact that he should refrain, with regard to the mission writings and mission books, from introducing innovations that falsify and distort the writing, which have been and will be devised by irresponsible falsifiers of language and writing. It shall be an honorable concern of his to preserve the good German language and written language in all its great values, because the irresponsibly conceived innovations and changes of writing and language let both wither away. This also happens through the densification, as you call the irresponsible introduction of the English language into the German language, for which especially the Americans do everything on the sly to let the American English dominate over all, other languages worldwide, and furthermore, to let the German language completely disappear from use for reasons of hatred, etc. But if we are already talking about languages, writings, and books, we are still very much waiting for your new book to be ready for printing. By this I mean your work, which you completed some time ago and to which you gave the title, Human Being of the Earth, I Wish You. For the time being, Bernadette is to devote most of her time to this work in order to complete it. And we have therefore decided that the corrections will be suspended on Thursday evening for contact discussions until your new book is ready for printing. And in this regard, it will probably be necessary for you to explain to Bernadette that this statement is in no wise an accusation against her, because unfortunately, in her sensitivity in all matters, she always tends to see reproaches and attacks against herself behind everything, where, however, none are given in any wise. In truth, her workload is enormous, and her achievements in this regard leave nothing to be desired. Nevertheless, she has her problem, which I have mentioned, which she should consciously turn to and solve thoroughly. In fact, with this problem of her own, she always depresses herself through wrong thoughts and feelings, which damages her psyche. The reason why your new work should be finished for printing is not that she would not do her work thoroughly, but that the book is a work of enormous importance and has priority over the contact conversations, which have been circulated as block books, paperback draft books, for about 2 decades, and therefore the information necessary for contact has been circulating worldwide for a long time. For this reason, the correction work with the contact conversation should be stopped for the time being in order to create the necessary time for the completion of your new book, which as a coded form is of great importance.
Oh boy, I have not thought of this book myself anymore. I will have to talk to Bernadette about that, even though I can already see and hear her wrong reaction. Only, well, I cannot get around to writing a new book at the moment, otherwise the problem would become even bigger. First of all, I have to make progress with the dream symbol interpretation in terms of the spiritual teaching. And on the other hand, there's a lot of other work to be done all the time, apart from what I still have to do for you. Do you actually know how many typewritten pages I have written for you since you took over the contacts with me in 1989?
I can even tell you that very well because just 2 days ago we added our data on that. Since November 1989, you have made 3,615 densely written A4 pages for our spiritual leadership.
Man, that is a few more than I thought. But tell me, my friend, there have been 2 earthquakes in Afghanistan in the last 3 weeks, and of course there have been many deaths. What caused this quake? Do you know anything about it?
It did not remain hidden from us. The cause of the 2 earthquakes can be traced back to the Americans, who caused tremors deep into the earth with their tremendous bombardment, resulting in tectonic movements that led to the earthquakes.
Several of us suspected it. Then I want to ask you something else. Some time ago I spoke to you about antibiotics, as I have done with Quetzal before. Now I would like to know how they work, what side effects they can have, and what you should or must be aware of when taking them. Even if you do not need antibiotics yourself anymore, as a doctor you will be able to give me information about it, no?
Certainly. To say and to explain is this. Often the irrationality and irresponsibility of the earthly doctors results in an unjustified wide use of antibiotics for all kinds of ailments which do not require any antibiotics. This, as I explained earlier, as well as Quetzal, makes pathogens resistant to certain antibiotics, which makes medication pointless and useless. But this resistance of pathogens also results from the unjustified use of antibiotics in animal breeding and fattening. And this is due to the fact that humans then enjoy the antibiotic-impregnated animal meat as food. This means that he or she absorbs excessive and superfluous quantities of antibiotics into his or her body, which over time and due to the overdose of antibiotics, the pathogens slowly but surely become resistant to these valuable drugs. If antibiotics are used in an appropriate and responsible form, then it is a highly effective and sensible therapeutic drug with a very effective healing power. However, if it is irresponsibly abused, such as by senseless use or overdosage, as well as by criminal use in relation to animal fattening, etc., then this results in nasty disadvantages for humans, which can end in fatal consequences. With regard to the effect of antibiotics, there are two principles which can be described as follows. One form inhibits the growth of the pathogens, which is called bacteriostatic effect, at least in our country, while the other form kills the pathogens and thus exerts the bactericidal effect. In fact, there are also active substances which, when used in quite low doses, inhibit the growth of bacterial strains, whereas when used in higher doses, they have a killing effect on the pathogens. During application, it is of course important that the correct active substance or antibiotics are used depending on the pathogen. Apart from the very good active substances known to terrestrial medical science, such as penicillin, beta-lactams, macrolides, gyrus inhibitors, sulfonamides and tetracyclines, etc. There are many others, but these must first be researched and discovered by the Earth humans so that even pathogens that have become resistant to antibiotics can be used effectively and powerfully.
What do we have to consider when using or taking antibiotics and with regard to side effects, etc.?
When taking antibiotics, gastrointestinal tract disorders can occur because these drugs also work against the necessary intestinal bacteria, that is to say, not only against the pathogens. The necessary intestinal bacteria, which we also call intestinal flora, have the task of decomposing the food components, and it is exactly this bacterial flora that is brought out of balance by taking antibiotics, which can cause diarrhea, for example. Also, a real functional impairment of the immune system can occur, which is not seldom the case, but which, like the intestinal function, regulates itself again more or less quickly when the antibiotic therapy is finished. The diarrhea itself, if it occurs at all, usually lasts only a short time and is therefore temporary, so there is no need to stop the antibiotic. However, if this is not the case, and the diarrhea therefore continues, becomes more intense and even bloody, then the antibiotic drug must be discontinued immediately and the doctor informed. However, if antibiotic therapy is terminated in the normal way, it is advisable to follow a sensible diet, with foods of probiotic nature being of particular value. If there is a tolerance for it, then dairy products are very suitable for it. However, it is important to make sure that there is no risk of allergies or any other susceptibility to milk in relation to these products. In fact, for some people it is unhealthy in many regards. And moreover, it is in no wise the healthiest foodstuff, as it is sensationally propagated on Earth by milk producers and by industrial milk processors and dairy product manufacturers. In addition to probiotic foods, many dietary supplements can be used to regenerate the immune system and intestinal flora, such as vitamins, trace elements, and minerals. Various other preparations are also useful, for example, yeast cultures, Saccharomyces boulardii, and bacterial extracts from Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus gasseri, and Escherichia coli, as these preparations are called in earthly medical scientific terms. Due to the use of antibiotics, the body also has an increased need for fluids, especially when diarrhea occurs. For this reason, the body should be supplied with more fluid as required, whereby all kinds of fruit juices as well as mineral-rich water and vitamin-rich teas are particularly suitable. Electrolyte preparations are also very useful for regeneration, which is why they should also be considered.
As I know from experience and from my family doctor, the doctor always gives a certain amount of medication to the patients, calculated exactly according to the days during which they have to be taken, so that the illness is really cured. But now there are many humans who do not take the rest of the medication completely when they are feeling better again. But this is a mistake, because even if there is a great improvement and a certain well-being, the precisely calculated medicines must still be taken, because only this guarantees that the disease is really and truly cured. If, however, the prescribed drugs are omitted prematurely, then the disease cannot usually be really cured, and therefore it will continue to exist underground and may break out again sooner or later. This applies, I am told, to all medicines, including antibiotics.
That is undoubtedly correct. Every person who falls ill and is provided with medication by a doctor should never stop any medication therapy prematurely, but should keep to the dosage prescribed by the doctor and thus take the medication given to him or her in full. Even if the symptoms of the illness have subsided, the condition has noticeably improved, or if the symptoms have disappeared completely. The medically prescribed drug dosage is always calculated in such a manner that the medication will last for a few days, beyond the time when a sense of well-being will revive the body. If, however, the medication is discontinued or stopped early, the germs are not completely destroyed, which increases the risk of a relapse, and the remaining pathogens become resistant to the medication if they are able to adapt to it over time. If this happens, it means that the drugs used become partially or completely useless because they lose their effect against the pathogens. In fact, it is then a question of the immunity of the pathogens to the drugs, which can lead to extremely unpleasant complaints of many kinds and even to the invalidity of the person, if not to death. Therefore, when taking medication, care should always and under all circumstances be taken to ensure that the rule of complete drug therapy is observed and not broken. In particular, this rule must be observed if symptoms of illness occur which indicate a microorganism infection or a viral or bacterial infection. However, medicines can only be effective against pathogens of any form if the rules of medication are observed and followed, including with regard to the taking of medicines for which the doctor issues a precise prescription. It should be noted that certain medications may be taken before and others with or after a meal, although most medications require that they be taken on an empty stomach, because only in this form will the desired optimal effect occur. However, it must also be taken into account that medications are generally not compatible with alcohol, but can cause very malignant reactions when taken together with it, which is why medications should only be taken together with liquids that are harmless, such as ordinary water or fruit juices. Milk drinks, or other milk products alone can be very harmful in connection with medication and even cause life-threatening reactions, which is why all circumstances, etc., relating to the taking of medication should always be clarified. If this is unclear, products whose effects are not known should be discontinued at least 3 hours before taking medication and returned to the body at the earliest 3 hours after taking the medication. This should be particularly taken into account with alcoholic drinks and milk, as well as with milk products of any kind. Care should also be taken when taking any kind of medication if antibiotics are also taken at the same time. When combined in the body, antibiotics and other drugs, including purely natural ones, that is to say herbal, etc., can lead to interactions with unpleasant consequences and even more health problems that can affect the body. But what can also be the case is that the antibiotics or the other drugs lose their effect partially or completely, whereby any ailments or diseases cannot be avoided or cured.
This refers not only to diseases of the body and its internal organs, if I think about it correctly, but also to external wounds, allergies and eczema, etc., right? And I also think that the drugs are not only those that have to be taken, but also those that are administered by injection or in the form of ointments and tinctures, etc., on the skin or on open wounds. Or am I wrong?
That is right, and you know it because you have worked as a veterinarian and medicine man in India, and you are at least somewhat familiar with these matters. So why the question?
Our conversation is being written down, so it will be read by a lot of people, I hope, because this information is important. And with this, I would like to officially ask a question again, the answer to which I also know: all kinds of expired drugs, both chemical and natural, whether pills, druggy sugar-coated medical preparations, tablets, suppositories, injections, creams, ointments, powders, tinctures, syrups, drops, vitamins, minerals, trace elements and compounding preparations, etc. should in any case not be used after their expiration date, because otherwise health damage or even life-threatening reactions can result if they continue to be used. In the mildest case, they simply become ineffective.
You said yourself that you already know the answer. Your explanation corresponds to the actual facts.
Then a question about the book jacket for the contact reports, which we do in A4 format. You said that you will decide on that. Have you done that in the meantime, and if so, what conclusion or result did you come to?
We have discussed it and decided that each volume should be marked with a consecutive number about 1 centimeter in size on the spine and on the front page before the book title. The book title itself, which you call Contact Reports, with the necessary addition, as you discussed, should be in the size of 1 centimeter. For the illustration of the cover, the same photo should always be used on the front of each volume, which should also apply to the back of the cover. That is the unanimous wish of us all.
The 2 pictures, do you have any special requests that we should consider?
We like your suggestion to use pictures from the Sadeleg, respectively, the Sadeleg series.
Fine, then we will stick to your wish, which is also our own. Then another question regarding the cats. These were actually bred as pets by the ancient Egyptians, about 6,000 years ago. At that time it was still common in Egypt to store food, especially grain, in large warehouses. Oil was filled in large clay jugs and stored in oil stores. Other food, such as dried meat, dried fish, and durable fruit, etc., in other special stores. The grain took a special position and was stored and guarded in special grain stores, because it was one of the most valuable goods in Egypt at that time. Especially the granaries attracted large numbers of mice, which multiplied immensely fast and became a real danger for the granaries. The abundance of these mice, however, attracted the many wild cats living in Egypt at that time, which entered the granaries and hunted the harmful rodents. The Egyptians, of course, quickly recognized the great benefit of the wildcats and began to tame them, so that the critters quickly became domestic animals, which soon found great reverence among the Egyptians. As a consequence of this, they soon advanced to holy animals, which were mummified at their death. Through travelers, sailors, warriors, refugees, and gifts, the tame cats were taken to other countries, where they spread more and more. This is how they came to Europe, where they were also kept as pets, but it happened again and again that some animals were abandoned or simply separated from the human environment, thus becoming wild, from which the European wildcats developed, as well as wildcats in other countries all over the world. But now to my question. The countless domestic cats that populate the world today are highly valued by humans in many respects. Also in terms of good psychological effects as animal fellow beings and companions, etc. It makes sense to me that animals, like cats, but also many other animals, can have a good and even therapeutic and therefore positive effect on humans, especially on their psyche and consciousness. Nevertheless, however, no animals should be kept in human dwellings, but only be housed outside of them. The health-related reasons are well known. But now it is said that cat skins are good for health, especially as a remedy for rheumatism. But Quetzal once said that cats have exactly the opposite effect, namely that people who are susceptible to rheumatism get rheumatic problems from cats, especially when they have these animals around them. So, long story short, the only question is it true?
Yes, it is correct. Cats can be the cause of rheumatic problems. Other or contrary Earth-human claims are not true. But your explanations concerning the origin of domestic cats were very interesting, besides that they were new for me because I had no knowledge of them.
Really? Also good. Then I have one more question. I know your point of view, because we have already talked about it. It is about the abortion solution, which is still hotly debated in politics. Could you give me your opinion again, please?
It is a malicious and high-handed presumption. Insolence, arrogance, and domineering domination by men over women, over their bodies and pregnancies and over their own freedom of decision, as is the case in many other matters. Therefore she, the woman, is degraded and debased, as she has been since time immemorial, to the status of a man's maid and slave. Even among earthly men, the state between man and woman should be such, as it is in our case, that the woman alone has to decide and determine in regard to her own concerns, including pregnancy and any necessary abortion of the same. If the man does not accept this in this form, then he will interfere in the woman's very own personal matters of body and life, depriving her of free self-determination through coercion and beating her into bondage and slavery, which is an injustice of an incredibly malicious form. This is also true when the rights and freedom to which a woman is entitled in this relationship, as in all other relationships, are denied to her by cultic, sectarian and religious laws, prohibitions and machinations.
Thank you. Those were all the questions I had for today.
Then I would like to talk to you now in a purely private manner.
There is nothing wrong with that, quite the contrary.